Green as fire shining bright, from the streets to satellite. Culture deep, future bright, rise together, reach new heights. From the Indus Valley to the modern day plan, we stand united, an incredible land. It all started with our nation's light, and now we march forward into the light.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Staying Indian. Now these past 4 years have been a real turmoil in terms of developing political tensions, economic fluctuations, geographical challenges in terms of doing the trade. And amid all this, there is US election that is coming up within a month. To talk about that, we have someone very special, Tarun Ghulati, who has been part of UK politics for last 1 year. He has fought 2 elections and he has a very good knowledge about global politics and how they are developing. Welcome, Tarun sir.
Thank you very much for having me today. Thank you, Gaurav.
So Tarun sir, first, we'd like to know about you. How was your experience having into elections of Mayor of London as well as MP?
Well, thank you. It's been fascinating the last year. Not many would fight 2 elections. I can tell you it's tough on the mind, body and soul, and indeed on the bank account. So you spend a lot of money in trying to run elections. It's also interesting when you meet different people. There's a learning experience also. And so, although I didn't win both those elections, it's widely believed I fought a great campaign for the Mayor of London election, where the current mayor, Mr. Sadiq Khan, he's won a record third term. So my congratulations to him. But many believed, and I believed, that I was the best candidate in the fray. But you abide by what the people decide. And the mayoral elections notwithstanding, 1 month later, the Prime Minister, Mr. Rishi Sunak, had called the parliamentary elections. So 2 parties approached me, and I got a prime ticket for the cities of London and Westminster. And we had about 3 weeks of campaigning. I must have knocked on 15,000 plus doors. And you don't meet everybody, but you go around knocking doors, leafletting, knocking on doors, and generally holding big public gatherings wherever you could. And I think that went well. There were 13 candidates from different parties and some independents. And I'm currently the chairman of Reform UK for the cities of London and Westminster, because we'll have, apart from some by-elections, council elections next year. And I hope to field some candidates who can then become councillors. So that's happening countrywide for our party. And we hope to be the next government in 2029. So hopefully I'll fight some more elections in times to come.
Great. And I was following your, campaign very closely, and at Staying Indian, we try to share the story of Indians who are living abroad and doing really great work. So congratulations to you, sir, and we wish you really well for the future elections as well.
Thank you very, very much.
So Tarun sir, having known this political scenario and how things have developed, and especially after COVID, you see a lot of things changing you have seen 2 wars. What do you think of US elections during this tough times?
A very good question. The US elections, which are slated for the 5th of November, I think are very, very closely fought. I think either candidate has, I think Kamala Harris is ahead of President Trump by a few percentage points. But that's not huge. I think there'll be the swing states will be critical. And I think a lot of these swing states, I think Mr. Trump does have a slim margin of a lead, but you can't depend on polling data all the while. I think the betting data that is coming out would seem to suggest that Mr. Trump will probably surge ahead. And the US presidential elections, unlike what we have in the UK, which is first past the post, you have the electoral college votes. So the 270 electoral college votes are critical. And my belief on the people I'm speaking with in the US, the Indian diaspora will play a key role. And I think Mr. Trump, I'm not a betting man, but I would believe that Mr. Trump might just win this election and get a second term in office.
With that prediction, there is a close comparison that can be drawn between his first term and the Biden administration. How do you compare both of these?
I think Mr. Trump has a totally different personality, where he's a businessman and also has certain characteristics and traits that make him more outspoken. He may appear to be going off a script and may not listen to all the teleprompters that perhaps may be asking him to say something. But he has a core group of voters that I don't think can be moved, or they won't be wavering in their sort of support. But there is a wide belief that the honeymoon period for Kamala Harris, where she had a big surge, given that President Biden unfortunately pulled out of the race, and people felt that with the connections with India and the West Indies, I think there is a good amount of wooing that is going on, and the Indian diaspora by nature has stuck to the democratic sort of vote, but I think the votes are divided for different reasons, which we can talk about. So, in a nutshell, I think there are two wars ongoing, and one in the Middle East, which could easily spiral out of control. Unfortunately, there's that scenario there, and there's the Ukraine and the Russia conflict, which has costs have risen for most people. So there are different voters are looking at different aspects, and I think interest rates have dropped by 50 basis points. The Fed has reduced the rate, so there's a bit of cooling off there. But inflation is still at 2.4% against a target of 2%. So I suspect interest rates should come down, and inflation should come down, and that may augur well for the economy. But at the moment, there's a cost of living crisis, there's an immigration issue, there's abortion, healthcare is critical for lots of people. But different diaspora think differently, and the Indian diaspora certainly is going to play a key role, I think, given their size in the US at the moment. Is the largest diaspora anywhere in the world. So it's close to about 5 odd million people. And the Indians, by and large, Indian Americans have done well. About 60% of hotels are owned by them. They are regarded as well-educated, perhaps better paid than many. And they're also divided in terms of their demographics determined. So if you're a first-generation Indian living in the US, you have a different viewpoint. The next gen and the Gen Z have a different viewpoint.
No, definitely. And I've been following Mr. Trump from his, kind of the season that he did in The Apprentice, so I've been following him for a long time. But, you see an overall right shift in Europe as well. There were elections in Netherlands, there were elections for European Union. You see an overall right shift. So what do you make of it? Does it show any kind of implication that it can have on US as well?
Well, certainly. You see, what's happening in Europe, and you're correct, is because people, ultimately the economies are finding a difficult place to be in as we speak. Most economies are suffering, supply chains are affected, the cost of living crisis is high. People are finding, particularly in the UK, for instance, some pensioners are finding it difficult whether to heat or to eat, and immigration is an issue. In the UK, we're talking of illegal immigrants, and that, again, is surging ahead in some of these countries in Europe. And people, whilst these blocs exist of force, whether it's the European Union or other blocs, I think people are realizing that they need to control borders, and sometimes it's affecting the local population. So there's an element of disenchantment, and that again, given that there has been massive immigration in terms of in the US, it is affecting particularly the Indian diaspora, which a lot of them went to the US. They are highly educated, the Indians are occupying the top seats of power, whether it's the World Bank chief who have worked with Mr. Ajibanga, or whether it is Satya Nadella or others in the fray in the US. They're holding top positions. And a lot of people are entrepreneurial there. They set up their businesses. A lot of people in the restaurant business, IT business, and they're concerned about immigration because they want to make sure they can bring their families. Sometimes the visa regime may change, and so they're concerned. So I think that also will have an impact. And as I alluded to earlier, the next generation, which perhaps may not think the affinity with the folks in India, the powers that be, they may not, some of them have never been to India for years. And so that also impacts. And the word, they're two large democracies. I mean, India is. And Prime Minister Modi had a wonderful visit in 2019, particularly when the Howdy Modi campaign was there. And it was well received, and there are large rallies. And so I think there are different factors in terms of demographics, immigration, geography, cultural, and even within the US, it's not a one-size sort of a situation there.
Definitely, and I think Indian influence, as you rightly said, is at the top in terms of whether it's business or politics. In US, UK, we are seeing that across different countries as well. You kind of also highlighted impact of both of these parties, whoever wins, on Indian diaspora. So can you weigh in the pros and cons of each of these, whether Republican win or Democratic win? What is in it for Indians living in US or the people who are trying to go to US?
Look, immigration is key, and it might well be that both Vice President Harris and former President Trump will need to look at immigration with a keen eye. There are, as we speak, there are a lot of Indians who are trying to come in without documentation, even in the US. But equally, there are lots of those who have got top degrees from the IITs and the IIMs who are looking to go there, who have families there. And it's no coincidence, as I hinted earlier, that's the largest diaspora outside of India, and by a large measure. So certainly, immigration will be key. And because there are a lot of doctors in the US, again from Indian origin, Indian Americans there, they're concerned about healthcare and what it means for them in terms of providing the right sort of healthcare and how they can uplift themselves. And the cost of living crisis is affecting everybody. So whether it's price of gas or anything else that you pay for.
I think a de-escalation is a way to go for any administration that comes in, whether it's in Middle East or whether it's in Ukraine, Russia, or in the South China Sea. You have seen tensions emerging in all parts of the world. You have seen recently how things rolled out in Bangladesh, which is a neighboring country to India. So with all this respect or all these things in mind, who do you think is the key person that can manage these geopolitical tensions, whether it's Harris or whether it's Trump?
Well, that's again a great question. It's difficult to, there was a recent presidential debate between the two, and many pollsters said that Kamala Harris did win the debate, but there are issues in terms of immigration, where she was regarded as a border czar for President Biden, and there has been massive amount of immigrants that have come in. Then again, the economy is not doing great, and while now I would expect with the cooling down of interest rates and the inflation coming down, there is an expectancy there. Mr. Trump did try to improve upon Obamacare, where healthcare is considered, but concerned. But he had to run with what was already there, make some slight improvements. I think healthcare will be critical, and I think the economy is a top. What happens on the kitchen table is a topic of discussion, and people ultimately, immigration is not the top agenda of a lot of people as we speak. It's what's happening with the economy, and both Kamala Harris and President Trump will, I think, work on the SMEs, which are the engine of growth for most economies. And they will try and give a boost to businesses, but equally, what happens geopolitically will impact. And whilst you might look at more, I think President Trump's idea of America first may deter some and think, look, how do we bring in wider folks? And where Kamala Harris is concerned, I suspect she will again probably look at Mr. Trump talks of bringing in more workers inside and all that sort of stuff, whereas she might look at keeping the factories in Mexico running and that sort of things for the auto workers and all that. President Trump talks of reshoring, whereas she might continue to do some offshoring and stuff like that. So I think there is a lot going on this election, and my personal feeling is Mr. Trump will win the elections only because there are two wars, and the exit from Afghanistan wasn't very clean either. So there is that element that lingers on in people's minds. And if this unfortunate wars continue, particularly the one in the Middle East, where a lot of unfortunate civilians have lost their lives, but that unfortunately is what war is all about. War is never good, and there is collateral damage that is ongoing. There is a feeling that he might be able to broker some peace in a transactional way.
So what do you make of how dollar would play a key role in the coming years? Would we be able to see de-dollarization?
I think there is a shift, but it is not making a huge impact. There are countries in Africa which are moving towards the aspect. Some are using their RMB. There are countries that are looking at even the Indian rupee, for instance, in the Middle East, and countries like Oman have been using the Indian rupee for a long time. But yes, there is a shift, and slowly the percentage of trade flows in not necessarily the dollar is increasing, but in the short term, I don't see a major shift from the dollar, because it's still the largest economy. It is still a huge military power. It still is more advanced than many, although China has caught up real fast. But at the end of the day, I think the dollar will remain the currency that most will use. There's an element of stability that people perceive it to offer, and that's been offering for years. So I think that will continue. It has come under pressure, but I think it'll withstand that sort of pressure.
So, sir, from Indian point of view, which administration do you think, because Indian relation with US have been of both love and hate, right? So there have been times where we have received some sanctions because of buying oil from Russia. Our Prime Minister was present at G7 summit as well. There have been some good times as well. So which administration do you think from Indian perspective would have a better relation? Would it be with Kamala Harris, or would it be with Mr. Trump?
Well, that's again a fascinating question, because I think the Indian government would work with both. And they have, I think, with whether it was President Clinton or President Bush and or President Obama, and then President Trump and President Biden now. There has been more in terms of security. That has there's more exercises taking place. The Quad relationship is building up, and India sits on the top table for. It's a large economy, growing economy. Many would say it's going to be the third largest very soon. And I think the fact that Prime Minister Modi managed to bring in the African nations, and it became under a G20, at least when he was last year chairing. So I think India is recognizes as a force, as a balancing power in the region. And whether it is President Trump, I think Prime Minister Modi has a great relationship with him from the past. And I was alluding to the Howdy Modi visit, where they've held a massive rally, as Prime Minister Modi's rallies tend to be. And I think they'll hit the ground running if he was to come in power. Where it comes to the balancing act, I think India will be concerned and will watch carefully how President Trump's relationship in terms of the Russian relationship and the Indian relationship, the Iran relationship that India has, will be watched very carefully. But in my opinion, India is unlikely to change its stance, and it's very important to the region for the Americans in terms of balance of power to keep that going. However, I think, as you can see, recently Prime Minister Modi, whilst he was seen meeting with President Putin, he also met President Zelensky. So he does, our foreign policy has never been better. Yes, in the past there have been ideas that we could have espoused in the region to have better relationships with neighbors, and friendly neighbors are always better than foes. But I think India is a power and a force to reckon with. The diaspora is strong, and there are 5 members in Congress, Indian Americans, and 40, I think, that are in the federal states, and in the state, they're representing the states. So they're also great fundraisers. They've contributed, and they're making their presence felt in different aspects of American politics. So I think that in itself will have a big influence, and a diaspora that cannot be ignored.
So definitely, and I've been really a big fan of Jaishankar sir. I've been watching his interviews, and the way he kind of takes a stance on certain things is really good. But you mentioned about people in Congress and people at both the sides from Indian origin. Vivek Ramaswamy has been a really kind of a person who has stood out, right? And he's supporting Mr. Trump. Have you ever got a chance to kind of connect with him, or what do you think of him?
I have not had the privilege and pleasure of meeting with him, but I've had certainly listened to some of his talks, his ideas, and some of them were good ideas, I think. And he ran a good race, and certainly many felt he would be in the running even today. But it's a good individual who knows where to step aside and when to step aside and whom to support. As I said earlier, the Indian diaspora in the US is not one monolithic body of people. There are Hindus, there are Muslims, there are Christians. They come from different states in India. They have different cultural backgrounds. And indeed, whether it's the first generation or the second generation also matters. I hinted earlier that Kamala Harris, I think, is likely to win a lot of the Indian votes.
Yeah, I think so. The same, and preparing for the worst. But U.S. elections always have a lot of drama. When it was Hillary versus Trump, you see email leaks, and when Trump lost to the Biden administration, you see the riot on the Capitol. But we haven't seen anything like Trump being attacked or an attempt to his assassination. Has it gone worse in terms of how the US politics has been?
That's again a good point. I mean, he's had certainly one assassination attempt where a bullet just grazed his ear, and he was extremely lucky. The hand of God was on him at that particular moment. And the second, potentially, when he was playing golf, could again have been very dangerous. Both luckily haven't played out, but and many, when he stood up with his fist up, felt that's a strong leader, that's somebody the world needs, but it hasn't moved the dial in terms of the core voters, I think. He hasn't, it's the sort of personality he has. He hasn't said, look at what's happening to me, look at the attempts. Well, he does talk about it in the rallies, but he hasn't really tried to sound like somebody who's, that's the card he wants to play, if you know what I mean. Yes, something like this should never happen. And he does thank the Secret Service for the way their roles are played out in the local law enforcement. But certainly there needs to be more protection. I think these sort of things should not happen. But that hasn't really moved the needle and the dial for the voters. I think the Republicans and Trump supporters are core there. And Kamala Harris's star has been rising, which it wasn't the case when President Biden was in the running. And suddenly, but the leaders narrowed.
A final question to you, sir. You said Indian diaspora is very rich and holds a lot of key places. What do you think Indian government can do well in terms of tapping onto this Indian diaspora?
In terms of because it's the American election, in terms of winning them going forward?
No. No, it's in general. It's not about the US election, but in general, what Indian government can do better.
Yes, I think whilst a lot of Indians tend to look towards the US, as the numbers would indicate, and for better opportunities, a lot of engineers and people in the tech world are looking towards the US, and there are families there. But the converse is not happening. There needs to be a drive, if you will, or the opportunity should be created where particularly the next gen, who may or may not have come to India, who believe that the democracy in India perhaps is not entirely the way they perceive the democracy should be or could be. They need to see for themselves and not just follow the press. They need to be an idea, because we talked of the business flows and the SMEs. Opportunities need to be created where they can come out and set up businesses. Incentives, subsidies, and others need to be granted, where perhaps it's happening, but more needs to be happening in that space. So that flow of people from the other side, from the US, will also augur well for India-US relationships. The younger generation haven't come out to India. So let them come and see the culture, the roots, and I personally believe that will be an eye-opener. There is a lot of development in India that Indians need to be proud of, people of Indian origin, and they've come out and see. And I think there's a lot of pride that has emerged over the last few years. And being somebody from Indian origin, I wear it on my sleeve very proudly as a badge of honor, and I think a lot of others will win. And I think this is, again, as I hinted earlier, Kamala Harris, her mother, came from India, but the vice presidential nominee on the other side, President Trump's nominee, his wife is indeed of Indian origin. So either which way, we'll have somebody from India or with Indian origins playing a role in American politics. So that's something that should excite most Indians across the world, and they're watching it very keenly. And may the best candidate win.
Indeed, and I couldn't agree to you more on this, that the brand India is getting bigger and better as we speak. So thanks again for spending time with us. It's always a pleasure having to talk to you. And thanks again for sharing your views on US elections. Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure, as always, to speak with you. Thank you very much for having me on your show today.
Jai Hind.
Good day. Jai Hind.
From the streets to satellite, culture deep, future bright. Rise together, reach new heights.